Hey, Ralph here. This is a pretty targeted instructor resource playlist tutorial for instructors who teach Linux. I've recently discovered I find to be very, very useful when I'm delivering Linux classes. The tool is tmux, so tmux, and it's not part of like a default installation for CentOS 7 or RHEL 7, for example, but it is part of the repository. So obviously, the first thing you'd want to do is get it installed. Now, I already have it installed. I'll just verify that with an RPM -Q for tmux, and I do have tmux installed. If you don't have it installed on your system, obviously, just use Yum or whatever tool you for your particular distribution that you need. And so tmux is similar to like the screen utility. And so you can create sessions. For example, right now, if I do a tmux ls, you'll see that I've got a couple sessions created. If you want to create a session inside of tmux, you just do a tmux and then new, and then -S for your session name. I'll just create a new one called day 2 here. And when I'm inside of the session, there's a lot of cool things that you can do. For example, and everything is sort of driven by Control B, and I'll post a link to my custom.tmux.conf file that I'm using. If I do an ls-a here, you'll see that I've got a .tmux.conf file, and I'll just cat that real quick. So these are just some of the options that I use to configure it. One of them is binding some keys to resize windows quickly. And then the other one, the set option -G, allow rename off, basically means that when I name one of my sessions, for example, if I do a Control B comma here, down at the bottom, I can type in the name. And if I want this to be my cron demo, for example, then I'll go ahead and so when I set that name using that option in my configuration, it will hold the name as I start switching windows. Otherwise, it doesn't necessarily hold the name real well. So lots of things we can do. So inside of this particular screen, I can then start creating panes in my window. So I can, if I say a Control B here and do a %, I get a split screen. So over here, I could connect over to my server, for example, so that if I'm demonstrating client and server, I'm split screen there, and I can kind of show the students both things that are going on. I could split my screen again, and then I could start following a log file down here. And so as we started making events, I can create additional windows here. So with just a Control B C brings up a new window here, and then I could split this window in any way that was like appropriate, And if I do a Control B W, you see to bring up a quick list there where I can quickly switch back to my other window. So it's awesome when you've got lots of things that you want to show at the same time. And it's just some quick examples here. If I get out of this session, and again, I'll just do a Control B D to detach. If I do a tmux ls, you'll see I've got this demo session created. So I'll say tmux attach -T demo. I'm in my demo section. I've got a number of different screens, if you will, down on the bottom there. You'll see I've got SE Linux, Samba, user management. If I go to my user management, so I'll do a Control B W, bring up the list, and we have our our user management here. I'll go ahead and select that. And so in this particular case, I've kind of I've pre-configured the environment for doing my user management demo. So here, this is going to be my work pane. Here is doing an ls on the home directory of the user I haven't created yet, but I want to show that the contents of the etc get copied into the directory. This is just, I'm tailing the etc password so we can see the new user created in the password file. I've got a tail going on the shadow file using the watch command, and then also on the group file down here. So, obviously this takes a little bit of setup to get everything pre-configured. I'll use my Control B arrow keys to get back to the main window here. Let me get out to root. And then when I go to create this demo user, I'll just do my user add demo user, and we can see how that populates the password file. We can see how that populates the group file. We can see how that populates the shadow file. And then we can also see here that the contents of, Etsy Scale, have been copied into that user's directory. And then I continue to use, this particular, environment. So I could say, I could use like user mod, and I could say user mod, and then throw a comment field on the user. So go ahead and say Ralph, and for my new demo user. And then we can see how that populates down here into, the password file. So, and continuing on, if we want to look at, setting password, have to say password on demo user, and then we change the password, and then we should see, that the shadow file will update with the password hash. We can look at like secondary groups. I could say group add, group add accounting. Then we see the accounting group pop in down there on the bottom. And then if I say, user mod, and then append secondary group, accounting for my demo user, we'll see that information down on the bottom again, populate into the Etsy group account. So, lots of, cool stuff that you can really show what's going on. If I start changing my aging information, if I say, change age for my demo user, and then minimum password age, and let's just set that to, to 5, and then the maximum password. So we're going to say, 40 days, and then the last password change, is going to default to today, and then the expiration warning 7, inactivity interval, I won't affect that, and then I won't, expire the account. And then we'll see down here in demo user, all of that information, the 5 days and the 40 days, that all gets populated. If you wanted to expire the account, right, we could look at this value. Remember, this is an epoch from January 1st, 1970. And so what happens when we, when we expire an account? So if I say password minus E for demo user, we'll see that value change to 0. So now that account is expired, and the next time the user logs on, they'll be forced to change the password. But it really, allows you to split the screen and, give a real good visual about everything, that's going on. If you take, you could use this is applicable to lots of things, cron, Samba, anything where you're doing client server, just to split the screen. Another example would be, if I go out here and I've got my networking screen, again, I've kind of got this guy pre-configured and ready to go for a, for my demo, but I've got a couple different things going on. I've got a loop over here on the right that is just running IP address show, and then pulling the fields for the interfaces, including the INET field, so we can see the IP address being bound. I'm watching NMCLI devices on the left and NMCLI connections on the right, using the -P for the pretty field. And then in the middle, I'm catting the contents of the, the Etsy network script. So if I want to configure interface, ENS5, right? So just kind of go through that, NMCLI, and then connection, add, and let's say connection name. Make sure I get the name right with what I want. Had a little typo here, so I better make sure I get my connection name the way I want it. So ESN5 looks like what I actually specified as the connection name, and then the interface name. So that'll be ENS5. And so we've got the type is Ethernet, and then what else? auto connect, make sure we turn that on, and then give it an IPv4 address. So I'll say IP4 and 172.30.0.10 on a 24-bit mask. So this is going to create, the configuration, and we'll see here. We can see that the IP address should be bound over here on the right. We should see that the connection is then associated with the device, and so we can see all these different changes going on, right? So there we go. The ESN5 connection is associated with the device, okay? And then up here, we pop in and we now see that we now have an IP address. Okay? And then we're also catting the file just to show them that what actually happens when you run the nmcli command, that what it's doing is it's creating a file. And then we could look at like what happens when we modify a connection, nmcli, connection, modify, and then we're going to modify our ESN5 connection here, and then we're going to modify the IPv4 address, and I'll change the address to 172.30.0.11. And what I'm going to highlight here is I'm going to highlight, the change is not going to occur, immediately on the interface, but it will write that change out to, the configuration file. So I go ahead and press, enter here. We see the change gets written out to the configuration file, but we see that it's still using the, the .10 address. And so if I do an nmcli, connection up for ESN5, what we'll see here is that the IP address will then change on the interface. So there's just a number of different situations where we're running commands and we're affecting changes on configuration files, or activity is occurring in our logs and things like that. And so just something to consider, to use the tmux utility to really let the student see, in real time, instead of saying, all right, let's do this, now let's go take a look at the log, or let's do this, now let's go take a look at the configuration file. This is a real opportunity for the student to really see, what's happening in real time. So I definitely am a big fan. I'm going to do a Control-B-D and detach here of this utility. I've found it to be, functional and very useful in the classroom. So I'd encourage anyone who teaches Linux to take a look at it. Again, I'm going to post a link in the description to my particular cheat sheet that I use for working with it. So it's a list of many of the popular commands. Most things are driven by just doing a Control-B and then some command, to split the screens horizontally or vertically. And so I'll post the cheat sheet that I made of the most useful things that I found, and then also the things that I would add to my tmux.conf file to give me a little bit more functionality the way I want it. So hopefully that's useful. Give it a shot. Let me know what you think, and we'll see you back for more tips at another time.